Being a gamer in the early to mid-90s was a radically different experience. We couldn't just pop onto social media or do a quick YouTube search for our gaming news. We actually had to wait for print magazines to come out and marvel at whatever it was they deemed important enough to show us. Sometimes they would even talk about Japanese games far before we would see them in the West, and more often than you would think, those games would never even make it over here. One such game is Live Alive, a Squaresoft JRPG for the Super Famicom that never had an official localization. Until now. It took 28 years, but Square Enix not only localized the game, they fully remastered it. Live Alive for the Nintendo Switch is a brand new beast, redone with HD 2D visuals and complete with voice acting. Let's find out if it was worth the wait. Live Alive is not structured like other classic JRPGs. The game is, essentially, about life in different time periods. But, unlike something like Chrono Trigger, there's no time travel. Instead, the game is split into 7 chapters with 7 different sets of characters, with an 8th chapter unlocking after you finish the first 7. Think of it like this: whereas the aforementioned Chrono Trigger can be viewed as a great novel, Live Alive is more like an anthology series or a fun collection of short stories. You essentially get 8, well, 9 if you want to get technical, bite-sized RPG adventures. There are some common story threads as well as revelations that tie things together in the 9th chapter, but for the most part, these narratives are self-contained. They're a fun mix, too, with settings that range from a Wild West showdown to a shinobi infiltration mission to a story of prehistoric caveman love. None of the campaigns have the complexity that many associate with the Square Enix RPGs, but they really don't have to. Most scenarios can be completed in 2 to 5 hours, so many of the plots don't really have time to cook. The flip side of this is that they also never wear out their welcome. One thing about the original Live Live is that the graphics, even at the time, felt a little flat. The remake, however, is stunning. It beautifully recreates the imaginative and diverse locales from the game with Octopath-style HD 2D, and the results are often jaw-dropping. I stopped multiple times in my playthrough to take screenshots of random environments. The updated effects for combat do wonders for presentation as well, and the voice acting is superb. The remastered music is also a treat. The songs in the game don't quite hold up to some of the great tunes from Chrono Trigger or the Final Fantasy series, but they're still well worth a listen. All these updates go a long way in making the obscure Japan-only title from the mid-90s feel surprisingly modern. Live Alive comes from an era when JRPGs were really starting to diversify, and it's definitely the result of experimentation within the genre. Each chapter has its own gimmick. The modern era, which is a bit of a fighting game parody, has you choose which fighter you're to face, and then your character gains his special attacks by having them performed on him. The Twilight of Edo Japan section has you playing as a ninja, so, appropriately enough, you can use stealth and subterfuge to navigate the chapter instead of brute force if you choose to do so. The Wild West has you prepare the town for an impending attack with the timer always ticking away, and this goes on and on for each and every chapter. I appreciated this quite a bit because it always meant that the gameplay felt fresh, which is important when the core gameplay is so simplistic. After a short intro, you can pick from any of the 7 starting chapters and play through them in any order you would like. You can even revisit them or save midway and pick a different mission if you're just not feeling the one you're currently on. Each chapter must be completed to access the endgame, however. The presentation and feel is different from chapter to chapter as well. The near future has an actual city map, for instance, while the modern day chapter has a fighting game style stage select. Combat is performed in essentially the same manner in every chapter. You have a turn-based battle system where you control one or more characters and choose their abilities with a menu. Pretty standard stuff. What makes it a bit more unique is the fact that you're on a 7x7 grid and have to move around and be aware of the range and direction of your attacks. This adds a bit more strategy to the whole affair. It can be fun for a bit, but the combat does have its downsides. You don't have any resources that you have to manage, such as magic points. This matters because I would often find myself using just 1 or 2 overpowered attacks over and over again within the same chapter. This made it so things could feel a bit monotonous. Live Alive is, to Western fans, a lost classic from the heyday of JRPGs, and the Switch version of the game is a near-perfect remake. It retains the charm, mechanics, and narrative of the older game while updating it for a modern audience. Is it a masterpiece? I'd say no, the game still has a few issues. As mentioned before, combat can feel stagnant and the chapters feel uneven. I spent a lot more time being a Kung Fu Shifu than I did being a maintenance robot. That being said, this is still a fantastic game and a really fun experience. I would suggest this for any fans of classic JRPGs, and would love to see this concept, an anthology collection of RPG adventures, revisited sometime in the future.